Mark chapter 14. While Jesus is in Bethany, he's at the table in the home of Simon the leper. A woman comes in with this jar of expensive perfume, and she breaks it open and pours it on Jesus' head. Some of those present expressed their indignation to one another. Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for over 300 denarii and the money given to the poor. And they scolded her. But Jesus says, leave her alone. Why are you bothering her? She's done a beautiful deed to me. You'll always have the poor, but you won't always have me. She did this to anoint his body in advance of his funeral, okay? Then, after this, Judas goes out to the chief priest to betray. Okay? Now, this story is retold in Matthew. It's not really changed much. The only thing that's changed is the disgruntled guests become the disciples themselves. Okay? Now, Luke also tells a version of this story. Right before this happens in Luke's gospel, he raises somebody from the dead. No name, no palaver, no drivel. It's just kind of a short little story. Nobody makes a big deal about it. Now, in Luke's version, Simon the leper, who was mentioned in Mark and Matthew, he now becomes a Pharisee, okay? Now, in Luke's version of this story, instead of pouring the oil on his head, she puts it on his feet for whatever reason. She starts crying, okay, and she's wiping. The story says that she's taking her hair and she's mopping up the tear sauce on his feet, and then she's kissing him. Sounds very dirty and disgusting and unsanitary to me. But, you know, to each his own, right? Okay, but he gets oil poured on him, but it's not his head, it's his feet. So to avoid this as a contradiction, they'll say it's a separate story. Anyway, let's jump ahead to another little incident in Luke 10, where Jesus is traveling around, and he comes into the home of two sisters who are named Martha and Mary. And forget about what that's about. It's not important, but we're introduced to Martha and Mary in chapter 10 of Luke's Gospel. Now we're going to jump ahead again to one of Jesus's parables or stories in Luke chapter 16. He's telling this story about a rich man and a poor man. The poor man's name is Lazarus. Lazarus is derived from the Hebrew Elazar, one whom God helps. Okay, and in this story, they die. Long story short, the rich man goes to hell and Lazarus goes to heaven. He's hanging out with Abraham, okay? And the rich man is looking up to Lazarus from the fires of hell going, oh, please go and warn my family so they don't go to hell too, something like that. Luke chapter 16, verse 30, Lazarus says, if someone is sent to them from the dead, they will repent. But Abraham says, if they don't listen to the prophets, they will not be persuaded, even if somebody rises from the dead. A story about Lazarus, a guy named Lazarus, and somebody being risen from the dead. And we have these seemingly, unconnected sisters, Martha and Mary. What's that all about? And then we also have the incident of getting his feet oiled at the house of the Pharisee. Okay? Now, take the elements from Mark and Matthew about the guests or the disciples complaining, and we're going to move ahead to John's Gospel now. Let's look at the details here. John chapter 11 and 12 tells us about a sick man named Lazarus, whose sisters, guess what their names are? Martha and Mary. Okay? Lazarus is sick. He lives in Bethany with his sisters Martha and Mary. Now, when Jesus finds out, he doesn't rush right over to help poor Lazarus, right? He lets him die. He hangs out, drinks coffee, does whatever he does, and then he makes sure that Lazarus is good and dead and stinking in the tomb before he rushes over to help and lets the two sisters suffer, knowing that their brother's dead. Anyway, Lord, by now he stinks, says Lazarus' sister Martha. He's been in the tomb for 4 days, and everyone's amazed and astounded, of course, when he raises him back from the dead. Okay? Now let's jump ahead to chapter 12 here. 6 days before the Passover, Jesus comes to Bethany, the hometown of Lazarus, whom he raised from the dead, and they have a dinner for Jesus. Okay, Martha serves dinner, and Lazarus reclines at the table with Jesus. And then Mary, she takes out a pint of expensive perfume made of pure nard, just like the Mark and Matthew story. And she anoints Jesus' feet, just like the Luke story, and wipes them off with her hair, just like the Luke story. And the house is filled with fragrance of the perfume and a whole lot of bullshit. Now, if you've guessed that somebody complains, guess who complains? It's actually Judas, the one that betrays Jesus. And Judas, the story of him, that's another bullshit story too. I'll have to do a video on that. And Judas says, why wasn't this perfume sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor? Okay? So, and then at this point, the authors of John's Gospel not only paint the Jews as aspiring to kill Jesus, but they also want to kill poor Lazarus too. Jeez, hasn't he been through enough? He's already been allowed to die and then brought back to life. You know, if there's any value in that. Where is the value in that? You know, if you lived in first century Jerusalem, occupied by Rome, you'd think that death would be better. Imagine being brought back to life. Oh, gee, thank you so much, Jesus. So that's how they invented this bullshit story of Lazarus being brought back from the dead, is taking elements from the three synoptic gospels and then just embellishing it. Let's go back to Mark, the very first gospel written again, to the beginning of chapter 14. The first verse, it says, it's 2 days before Passover. Okay? Now, if this is 2 days before Passover, don't you think that it would have been prudent for Mark to say, oh, by the way, 4 days before this, they had a party at Lazarus's house. You know, that guy that Jesus brought back from the dead? Of course not. That wasn't important to Mark or Matthew or Luke because the story just simply didn't exist. Lazarus didn't exist. It's a bullshit story. Thank you for watching.